Hello and welcome to another week of chess openings with me, Zach Slagowski, as I go over all the main chess openings that you can learn as a beginner to the game of chess. This week we're going over the Grunfeld opening, which is a black defensive opening against white's d4 pawn opening. So there's a lot of theory behind the Grunfeld opening, but we're only gonna focus on three of the main variations that you're going to see. It's gonna be the exchange variation, the Russian variation, and the Brinkmann attack from white. And so we're gonna go over all the possible ways that you can be attacked as black in these variations, and like what are the best moves for you to do, as well as what are the best moves for white in these three variations. So we are going to start with the exchange variation, and we're going to be black here. And so white's going to start us off with d4. We open up with the f6 knight here. What white will do is they'll have to push here with c4. If they open up with a bishop here or a knight move, you're most likely not going to be playing the Grunfeld. It needs to open a certain way with white, which makes it kind of frustrating as black because you have to have a Indian game repertoire to kind of use this opening. You then do your second move going g6. They'll open up with their knight move there on c3, and then we push into the center, giving up center control by going to d5. Now, the thing that white will do is they'll take the pawn obviously free. We take the knight, and white will then push into the center, trying to take control of the center. Now, there are a lot of ways that we can go about attacking from here on out, but we're going to go with exchange variation here. We exchange the knights. They'll take with the pawn, and they'll have a really strong pawn center, but we have the flexibility and the mobility of our pieces here. The theory thing to do from here is to push up this pawn to c5 to try to break up the center and see if they bite, basically. If they do, great, but more often than not, they're gonna open up with the c4 bishop, trying to put more pressure on the king's side. We'll fianchetto the bishop like we do in all these Grunfeld openings, opening up this long diagonal, trying to attack this rook if we can. White will continue to develop, and we want to castle as much as possible and protect that king. White will then also castle. We will take the center. They should also take the center, and we push for the knight, trying to attack the center here. So we have two defenders, and we have three attackers here, trying to take the center control from white, which obviously we're going to see the bishop come down here and reinforce that pawn, given the three defenders that stops us from attacking the center. So we'll split out this knight here to try to attack this bishop. The bishop will then consolidate in the center, and we'll bring the knight back here. So this is where black kind of gets their equality when fighting in the center. If white wants to keep going back and forth here, we'll like the knight and the bishop will just go back and forth until we repeat and get a draw. And so white needs to guard this queen side pawn right here. But the best case scenario for black would be for the bishop here to go to c2 here. We'll push up our pawn. They'll push up their pawn. We then go attack the bishop. This pawn structure is preventing this attack with the bishop. They then open up the bishop there, attacking this pawn here. And we open up, pinning the knight to the rook. This equalizes for black and is kind of the best case scenario if white plays the right way against the Grunfeld defense. So that is the exchange variation. Next up, we have the Russian variation, which fares better for white than it does for black, like in the exchange variation that we watched before. So we'll go over it here. We have to open with a d4, knight to f6, we then push to c4, we then go to g6, knight to c3, and d5, the standard opening for the Grunfeld defense. Now, if white goes to f3 here, we will continue developing our bishop, getting it fianchetted on this long diagonal, and white will move its queen to b3. White is trying to clear up the position in the center for itself, and black is going either e6 or c6 is very passive. So black gives up the center in hope for active play of his pieces, basically. So from here, the best move for black to do is to take the pawn. Queen takes it, and then we castle. So as in the exchange variation, white now has an imposing pawn center, but black has the mobility to try to create attacks on the white king. The pawn center comes out, going to e4. We swing the bishop out, trying to take out this knight, and if we do that, we mess up the pawn center that white is trying to castle to. This is also the knight that is protecting this d4 pawn here, and by taking out this defender, it opens up the center for attack. Black will then come out here to bishop to e3 to defend this queen pawn, and black will then swing open the knight to open this bishop attack here. The queen then retreats to try to open up a attack here, and black stops that by putting the knight in front of it, going on b6. The queen pawn right here is now under pressure now that the knight has left here at f7, opening this bishop diagonal. So from here, the rook is going to come here and to defend this pawn. This is where the crux of the position plays. The knight comes out to add another attacker on the pawn. The pawn then pushes up to attack the knight. You have the bishop here attacking there. You have an attacker here, but you have the three defenders, the four defenders right here on there. and it's putting the black at a really uneven position. White then puts this bishop here. If the white was to take this knight here, it would leave that rook open for attack there. We then take the king there, which they would then take with a pawn. We push the bishop here, trying to prevent this castling and weakening white's king side. So white has a lot more maneuvering space for his pieces than black. Black has not the best development. The pawn center for white is a much better advantage for white from here on out. And so what we might see is rook comes out here, queen coming out here to try to join the bishop attack. Black basically needs to retreat and is losing space to white ever so slightly. And so this is why the Russian variation is much better for white than it is for black when you play the Grunfeld Defense. So that is basically created by this knight here and the queen coming out here. That's what makes this the Russian variation. And the final variation that we'll be looking at today is the Brinkmann variation. And so this variation looks just like this. The queen comes out, knight comes out. It's the same setup as we have for all the other ones. D5 comes out. To make the Brinkmann attack, the bishop then comes over here to f4. We kick the bishop into the fianchetto position as we always do, and then black closes the pawn chain now that this bishop is out. We castle. Black's move here is essentially a gambit because he's giving up this pawn by going, the pawn takes here. If we would take the pawn, they go take the pawn, and the queen takes the knight there. White would necessarily come out with the advantage in material, but black would win by having a much better maneuvering advantage. So from here, white will kick out the rook to try to fortify this file. Black then pushes up the c5 pawn to try to create some tension here in the middle. White will take, and black will kick out this bishop, trying to fortify this even more. Because we don't want this pawn to take, and then we lose our queen, and losing any advantage black really has in this when it comes to their mobility of their pieces. Black right now is doing well despite their pawn minuses. For example, this is what would be the best case scenario for black. White takes there, black takes with the knight, attacking both the bishop and the knight. And then white comes in and takes that knight. We then take it with the bishop. They push the pawn out here to prevent this pawn being taken by the bishop. The queen comes out here, placing a check on the king. The queen then comes out there to shield the king. We then trade pieces and we open up, creating a discover check as we attack here and possibly get the rook. So in summary, these are three lines of the Grunfeld. There are so many different variations and lines that you can take, but these are the three most common that you will find when you play the Grunfeld. I will leave a link in the description of the Lichess study that I use to go over a bunch of different lines, and it helped tremendously when learning this opening. But in summary, of the variations we looked at, the exchange variation and the Brinkmann attack favor black the most, and the Russian variation favors white. So if you like that video, please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. I also stream on Twitch every Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday from 6 p.m. to midnight. We would love to have you there and play me as I work on these openings every week. Next week, we're going over the Halloween Gambit, which is a 4 knights gambit variation that is very aggressive for white and helps open up the center for them and puts the attack on black. Thanks, and we hope to see you then.